Raider Nation, what's going on? You're watching the Raiders Report. Mitchell Renz from Chat Sports here to give you the breaking news. The Silver and Black have gone out and they have signed defensive tackle John Jenkins. Can I get some DTs in the chat right now? I mean, man, we've been waiting a long time. When free agency opened on March 13th, it's not why I wore the shirt, the Raiders community has been like, man, when the hell are we going to get a defensive tackle? When you add a player like Jenkins, it's not a big-time DT signing. The contract details that at the time that I'm making this video are not out yet. It's going to be a one-year deal. I imagine it's going to be somewhere around $1.5 million. But you needed a big boy on the interior. And guess what? They call him Tank for a reason. Not because he makes graphics quickly, but because he's a big guy on the interior defensive line. 6'3", 340 pounds, had 20 tackles last season for the Miami Dolphins. Is he getting up there in age? Sure. But defensive tackle is one of those positions where I do think we have been able to recognize that, hey, you could play this at a pretty high level, especially once you're getting up there in age, especially if you fit the right defense. Now, if you don't already know, this is exactly why you should subscribe to the show. Get daily Raiders videos, the latest breaking news, party with Raider Nation, and I know this, if you bleed silver and black, I promise you, I got that commitment to excellence because y'all have that commitment to excellence. So hit that sub button, turn on those notifications right now. So I know a lot of people are asking, all right, Mitch, where exactly does Jenkins fit on this Raiders depth chart? Well, right now, the Raiders, they re-signed Jerry Tillery. You brought in Bilal Nichols last offseason on a 2-year, $11 million contract, and I'm hoping that Nichols plays a little bit better this upcoming season. Was dealing with a nagging knee injury. It was a meniscus tear in June, which really limited him early on, but did start to play a little bit better as the season continued. The Raiders drafted Neil Farrell Jr. You drafted Matthew Butler last season, and both of those guys did not get a lot of run. However, I know that Patrick Graham, Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler, they got a lot of confidence in those two guys in their sophomore year. Now you had Jenkins, who personally to me is probably right now your second best nose tackle. Last season with the Dolphins had a good run in terms of being able to get at least some pressures on the quarterback, but that's not why he's here. John Jenkins is on this roster because he is a run stopper. And if you can get 300 snaps out of him, 350 snaps out of him on the entire season, that's what you're looking for. It's 3rd and 1. It's 4th and 1. You know a run's going to come. You put John Jenkins. This is your Jonathan Hankins replacement if you want to look at it. He's actually probably a better run stopper than Hankins. So what I want you to do right now, if you don't know what the Raiders Report is about, we're a family here and we're always going to be able to interact, whether we're sitting down at a bar, whether we're hanging out grabbing dinners, whether we're just talking to each other in the chat. I want y'all to give me your opinion because that's what friends do. So this is going to be the pinned comment on today's show. Let me know what your grade is here of John Jenkins signing with the Raiders, A, B, C, D, or F. My grade for going out and getting Jenkins is a B. Is he a great player? No, but it fills a team need. And it wouldn't be fair to me to sit up here on this show the amount of times that I had and say, I like this signing. You know, that's a good signing, but we didn't get a defensive tackle. Now, finally, the Raiders, they went out and they got somebody who, honestly, is a good fit. And the one thing that every single person should always look at when discussing what Ziegler and McDaniels could do is, have they had some sort of connection with a coach, with a staffer in years past? And the answer to that with Jenkins is yes. I will tell you about those connections, but first, let's look at the last 4 seasons here. 16 games with Miami, 20 tackles, 0 tackles for loss, 0 sacks last season with the Fins. 2021, 16 tackles. This is merely just a depth option. But the reason why this deal ultimately ended up going down, when Patrick Graham was the defensive coordinator of the Dolphins back in 2019, guess who had probably one of his best seasons as a pro? You guessed it. It was John Jenkins. Also on that staff, guess who? Brian Flores. Brian Flores has connections to, guess who? Josh McDaniels and both Dave Ziegler. So you checked off the Patrick Graham box. You checked off the Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler box. On top of that, he's also spent some time with the Chicago Bears. Okay, so now you also checked off the Champ Kelly box. A lot of different crossroads here with Jenkins, with different staffers, with a lot of people who make important decisions for the Silver and Black. So realistically, it's a good depth move. I still want the Raiders to add potentially another defensive tackle in the draft because this still is a weak DT room. You're going to see a lot of moving parts on that defensive line. You're going to see a lot of big bodies. They're going to try to do a lot of rotations. In a 4-3, they're going to mix it up. They could even do 5 guys on the front. Not the burger, but 5 guys on the front of the line, and you need your big guys to ultimately be pretty freaking fresh. Now, coming up next here on the Raiders Report is one of the things that I want to be able to discuss here is just because you make a move in free agency, that does not necessarily mean that you're not going to do anything in the 2023 NFL Draft. If the Raiders, with 12 of their picks, and I'm going to be respectful here, right? If they don't take a defensive tackle, I'm going to go insane. I do think that there is some upside with some of the younger players we have, but there is some real good talent, especially on the defensive line. The question is, how ballsy do you want the Raiders to get early on? Because the number one prospect, in my opinion, on the board, his name's Jalen Carter. He was my number 1 overall guy, defensive tackle out of Georgia. And if the draft would have happened in February and March, he would be the number 1 prospect on a lot of people's boards. However, has some off-the-field issues. We know McDaniels and Ziegler have said that they cannot afford to miss on the number 7 overall pick. Jalen Carter at his pro day looked... Honestly, it looked like Jugs and I doing a 40 and then actually trying to run a 40-yard dash. I mean, he was out of shape, did not look good. So my question to the nation out there is this. Let's just say you're sitting there right now. It's draft day. You got Dave Ziegler to your right. You got Josh McDaniels on their left. They look at you right now in the eyes. I'm looking at right in the chat, Jamo H, a.k.a. Devil J. They look at you, Devil J, and they say, hey, are you taking Jalen Carter at number 7? Give me a yes, give me a no. Because I'll say this. Is he worth the risk? Yes. Does that risk scare the hell out of me also? Absolutely. And if you're not looking to take a risk, then I don't think that Jalen Carter is going to be on the board. But you know what I am okay with? If you're going to type your N for no, then the next man that I would love for the Raiders to get, it is Calijah Kancey. And if you have watched this show before, you'll know that Kancey was a player that 2 months ago, I said it was a lazy comp because it's Pitt, it's an undersized defensive tackle, but I was like, the measurables. And it reminds me a lot of Aaron Donald. What does he go out and do at the NFL Scouting Combine? Puts up pretty freaking good numbers. Also, Kancey was at the Senior Bowl with Patrick Graham. If the Raiders were able to figure out a way to trade back, get a little bit of extra draft capital there in the top half of the round, you land a guy like Kancey, maybe you add another cornerback, maybe like a Deonta Banks, maybe like a Devin Witherspoon. I would love that start to the NFL draft way more than just the Raiders sitting there at number 7 and taking Jalen Carter. Another player to look at here in terms of who you could take at defensive tackle, Bryan Bresee, who his junior tape when he was at Clemson, he looked like the best defensive tackle in the country. Had an ACL injury, lost some of that juice, but then at the Combine, he looked athletic. He's got a good burst, and he is a player that's going to bust his freaking tail, bust his ass for you every single snap. You want a dude who's going to be a good fit in the locker room? It's Bryan Bresee. My question is, though, the tape I watched on him in his final year at Clemson, I don't realistically love it. Another name to keep in mind, and spoiler alert, I did a mock draft yesterday on our live show. It's going to be going out a little bit later in the week. I took Mazi Smith. I think Mazi Smith, from an athletic profile standpoint, is a top 4 defensive tackle in this year's class. Does he have some off-the-field issues? Yes. Are there questionable things that you should look at? Yes. Will he be a good locker room fit? I don't have the answers to that. But I know that if the Raiders are saying, all right, we're not going to take Jalen Carter early on, we miss out on Calijah Kancey, who's a good defensive tackle that we could potentially get from picks 38 to 70. I don't think Smith is going to be on the board when the Raiders pick in round 3 at 70, and I do think he's going to be on the board at 38, but we've seen the Raiders trade, and they are not afraid to trade, so if they trade back, they could trade up. Mazi Smith is a player that I'd be willing to take a risk on. And then another player out there that's another big body defensive tackle, Siaki from Baylor. Their defensive tackle line, I also like Keanu from Wisconsin. I think he's a good player to keep an eye on as well. The amount of defensive talent that is in this year's class is one of the reasons why I am hopeful that the Raiders are able to find 4 high-quality starters and maybe 8 legit players that you can build your defense around continually to go forward. If you don't already know, I'm at Mitchell Renz 365 everywhere, and I would hope by now, for those that watch the show, know where to find me. And anytime that there's news, I'll do my best to tweet it out. If you guys want to see what crazy shit I'm doing tonight, I'm hanging out with the Chat Sports guys at a bar. We're going to be watching some college basketball. Cannot freaking wait. If you're not watching this live, pop in on here on the live show. Our Friday shows get wild. It's known as happy hour because it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? So if you want to have a good time, put those drinking pants on. Let's celebrate the news around John Jenkins signing with the Las Vegas Raiders.